Hello, welcome to 21 This Week. I'm Susan Heltemes. Coming up next, does fiscal impact us? New House Speaker, Hogan for President, and the Mueller report. We are joined today by voices from all sides. Former Rockville Mayor Susan Hoffmann, Republican businesswoman and former House of Delegates candidate Verelyn Gibbs Watson, Mark Uncapher, Secretary of the Maryland Republican Party, and former Democratic Majority Leader John Hurson. Stay tuned for these topics on 21 This Week. Newly elected council member Andrew Friedson has introduced legislation that would require fiscal impact statements accompany new legislation. John, this is routine in the Maryland legislature where you served. You did have this impact statement when you were voting on proposed legislation. Did you use it? Did it matter?
Yeah, it helps. The issue is who writes them, which was a bipartisan staff, but it's also how it's written and what the background is. So actually it makes sense to have them, but what's the background that they give you? If it says, oh, this will cost more or this will cost less, it's not helpful.
Well, Verelyn, as a businesswoman, you know about fiscal impact statements. Would such information be useful to citizens when they're reviewing legislation, or is this just going to be another way to add jobs to the county council staff?
I think this is going to be absolutely useful. In fact, I wanted to give Council Member Friedson a high five when I read this. Finally, as a small business owner in Montgomery County, so many times I've thrown my arms up in frustration over legislation that gets enacted without full impact. So I'm excited about this.
So Andrew Friedson, we had a chat, and he actually explained that he wants to take what is being done now, which is very superficial, bring it over to the council side. In the Office of the Legislative Oversight, and have an economist be in charge of it, and have the business impact and the economic development impact that the legislation will affect. And that's a very different approach. So kudos.
Susan, I just want to add to that. This week, the school board, the council, the executive all came together and they want more money for education funding. How is this going to fiscally impact the county?
Well, the county executive did not fully fund the 2.6, I can't remember the number now. I think it's $2.66 billion that they requested. He underfunded it by about 15 million or so he got close. But they have found, the county executive has found $5 million from legislation that was passed in Annapolis just this session. The state's going to take over more of the responsibility of the 911 system, and so that gives us $5 million. So they've got another 14 or so million that they have to find, and apparently the executive and the council are committed to funding it all.
Yeah, okay. Well, Mark, speaking of county expenditures, there appears to be some dissatisfaction on the council side regarding Executive Elridge's proposal to boost the pay of the county employees. How do you assess the impact of those concerns?
Well, the increase, which depending how you count it, would be up to 9%, is well in excess of what the inflation rate, what most people in the private sector or even other public sector positions have been getting recently. So it does seem to be excessive. And remembering, too, that personal service costs are the largest component of the county's budget.
It certainly is.
Can I just disagree with that for a second?
Sure.
I mean, you're right. The 9% seems excessive in any given year. But a lot of this was because during, the economic down, the
recession,
lean times, the recession, the Great Recession, they got nothing. So this is kind of trying to make up for that. But
As did many people in the private sector as well.
I
Yes.
get that. But the point is, the private sector now, thank you to our president, are making a lot of money now. So the question is, do you catch up these guys or do you not? And I completely agree with you that we have to be careful here because, we have teachers are
they're gonna
coming
want more,
behind us.
too.
They're going to
The
want
other
more,
thing
too.
is,
So,
though, it's ironic it's coming now because there's a view that there's going to be a recession on the horizon. So anyway, this is going to be something to watch as they get closer to voting on the budget. And on to our next topic. Until the passing of House Speaker Mike Bush, House members knew what to expect, and the Speaker's Democratic control of the House was unquestioned. Now that he's gone, the race to succeed him is heating up. A special session to make the choice takes place next Wednesday, May 1st. Before we start the discussion, audience, I just want to say we tape Friday night. By the time you see this, everything could change. There are meetings going on. There are conversations going on all over the state. There are phone calls buzzing, and everybody seems to be intervening. So between when you hear this, call your legislators, put in your 2 cents too. So Susan, as we begin the details of the battle, how will this race for Bush's successor affect Montgomery County?
Well, right now we're down to Chairman Maggie McIntosh and Chairman Derek Davis, and
But how's it going to affect
yes.
us?
So unless the Montgomery County delegation has cut a deal with either one of them, it's really not necessarily going to affect them in a good way or affect our legislators in a good way. Maggie McIntosh has a reputation for being so pro-Baltimore that it raises some concerns for me. Derek Davis, of course, is from Prince George's. At least he's from this part of the state. Maggie McIntosh happens to have a more progressive reputation, and so the question.
But have you heard anything like we'd lose committee chairs either way?
No, and I must say, if either of them take that route, that is a huge mistake, and I don't think either of them is that politically naive that they would do something like
So,
that.
John, today, Speaker Pro Tem Adrian Jones from Baltimore County dropped out of the race and endorsed Derek Davis. History will be made no matter who's going to get elected of the two remaining candidates. Baltimore City's Maggie McIntosh, the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, would be the first female and the first openly gay person to hold the spot. Derek Davis, as Susan said, from Prince George's, is the House Economic Matters chair. He would be the first African American to hold that spot, and of course the job would continue in the hands at that point of a man. So as a former member of leadership in the House, what's your take and what are you hearing? A lot, I bet.
Well, I'm thankful that you said we're recording this Friday night, because I think literally in the next 5 days, everything's going to change. Right now, Susan was right. You have Maggie McIntosh from Baltimore City, and then you have Derek Davis from Prince George's County. Big clash. Derek is relying on Republicans to elect him in the House of Delegates.
And Mark's going to talk about that.
And that's great, because I want to hear what Mark says. But the point is, he's not going to get a majority of Democrats within the most Democratic state, one of the most blue states in the country. But this is not unusual. This has happened in North Carolina, it's happened in California, where, groups of Democrats have relied on Republicans to get them elected. So I am hopeful that Democrats stick with Maggie McIntosh, because that's going to be the best place for Democrats.
Mark, she's right at this intrigue in this process, because if Derek Davis gets it, it's going to be with the support of Democrats. What's that going to mean? Republicans, rather. And what is this going to mean for the legislature and the role of Republicans in the next session?
Well, John picked up on the phenomena that this has happened where there have been bipartisan coalitions in other states. Ohio is an example. There's a Republican majority in the House of Representatives, but Democrats supported a particular Republican and he became Speaker. Same thing happened in New York, but in the state Senate.
Different.
That was different in
Okay.
New York. But the dynamic that's interesting is that it does make that legislature that much more centrist, because when you've got both parties having elected a speaker, they're not allied with one particular
So
party.
Verelyn, they keep hearing down there, it's time for a female leader in Annapolis. It's time for an African American leader in Annapolis. And so as a female, an African American, and a conservative, how do you view this? What do you think?
Well, I think it's time for a lot of things in Annapolis. And, one of the things that I'm excited about, obviously, as an African American, it's always great to see African Americans succeed. As a woman, it's wonderful to see women succeed. I will say one of the things that I always talked about on the campaign trail was trying to avoid labels and trying to focus on who is going to do the best job.
And so on that point, wait a minute, we're out of time.
But purely from the standpoint of making sure that there is a more bipartisan approach, I'm excited about Derek Davis.
And we're going to be right back after this short break. Larry Hogan has gone to Iowa and New Hampshire and is getting more street cred as the incumbent president continues to dive, I won't say, into a deeper quagmire. Verelyn, this week Hogan got more attention when his father's statement before voting for the Nixon impeachment was replayed over and over as he spoke about the need for courage to take a stand. His son, Governor Hogan, is echoing his father's sentiment more frequently. How can Hogan stay relevant on the national stage and not offend the Republicans at the national level who don't want anyone to challenge the incumbent president, even though most of them will say quietly there are some flaws? What do you think?
Well, it's no secret that I'm a huge fan of Larry Hogan, and I think what he's doing is very smart. And me personally, I think this is more about laying the groundwork for 2024 than it is for 2020. But I think the thing that Governor Hogan is trying to position himself for is just in case some fallout happens. So I think he's being really smart about it, and he's got until November to decide.
Well, Mark, in 2015, I remember you talking about Donald Trump was coming to be the guest speaker at the Maryland Democratic dinner. This year, it's going to be none other than Vice President Pence. What does this choice portray to the nation when Maryland's own governor is Larry Hogan?
I guess I would ask, how did Martin O'Malley do in the Democratic primary in Maryland in 2016?
No, that isn't anything to do with it.
You know, it does. Being governor is one job, being president is another job, being vice president is another. I think people can make the separation.
You think?
Yes.
Okay. So what else are people hearing? Today I heard on NPR somewhere they were saying that what Hogan was doing was to prep the way for Kasich. And I don't really believe that, but
I think that's so much intrigue. That's almost
it's
so
palace intrigue.
I think Larry Hogan is looking out for Larry Hogan.
Yeah. Right.
It was fascinating this week to see the video of his father giving a very eloquent speech before he made that vote. It was painful for him. And his son is sounding a lot like that.
Well, he showed great political courage and something that we've always all admired. And for those who aren't aware of it, that Larry Hogan's father was
if you haven't seen it, it's something
amazing.
to look up on YouTube,
really
because it really is a testament. I mean, coming from Minnesota, I knew about Spiro Agnew, but then when he made that statement, it was very touching. Okay, the Mueller report. You knew we had to talk about it a little bit. Last week, the redacted Mueller report was released, and the response has been mixed. No surprise there. Those on the left view it as a blueprint for the Democrats to impeach, and many on the right feel totally vindicated. The president describes it as total BS. You figure out what those stand for. And his opponent in 2016, Hillary Clinton, views it as a beginning for Democrats to logically plot a course, as was done in the Nixon era, to educate the American people of the corruption of the president. Panel, we could spend hours on this topic, but I would like to get your sense as of today in relation to the report and the aftermath. And Mark, you're going to be first.
Sure, this was an investigation about whether or not there was Russian collusion with Trump and the Trump campaign. And the conclusion is those accusations are a complete hoax. It didn't exist. And the fact that the House Democrats are looking in a different direction for where their investigations are going is really confirmation that there's no there in terms of quote unquote Russian collusion.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute.
So wait a minute, Susan's next. And then when we all go
Wait a
around,
minute.
Susan.
Hogan. So first of all, the special counsel Mueller is allowed to unearth other crimes and pursue them as well. So saying that they're looking at other things, that's because they were uncovered and exposed. So you don't just turn your back on it if it looks like something wrong has happened. I think if there's been no problem, then anybody that the Congress asks to come speak should come. Shouldn't have to have a subpoena, but if it does, then that's how it is. If they've got nothing to hide, let them tell the truth.
And the Russian Maria Butina was sentenced to 18 months in jail today. So
And that's unrelated.
yeah,
Yep.
unrelated.
And that's with the NRA and Russia. Huh?
So
You know?
John,
So, quickly, the one thing I want to say out of this is I believe it is time to move on. I actually think we've got a presidential election, and I urge Democrats to, hey, it's time to elect a different person. I think that's our most important mission. That's number one. Number two, though, I think it's absolutely appropriate for members of Congress to continue to investigate this. There are issues outside of the Mueller report that need to be investigated. This president is making beaucoup bucks off of, emoluments and everything else. I think that's absolutely appropriate for Congress to continue to investigate. I don't think it should be a Democratic focus, but I do think it's important to continue investigating this guy because he's corrupt. He is a corrupt president. He is a lawless president, and we need to continue to
so
investigate
Verelyn, you're not going to get cut off this time. What are your thoughts?
Well, I echo a lot of the sentiments that Mark shared. I mean, I actually think that it's much ado about nothing and it's time to move on. I cannot believe that there isn't anything better that the government should be focused on than trying to dig up something where it apparently seems that there is nothing. And I recall when this whole thing first came about, the Democrats said they were going to accept the findings, and then the findings come out and we don't accept the findings. So I think at some point we have to move on and we have to move forward and stop,
And I think
being
though
so
that
circuitous.
what we
Yeah.
seem to forget is Mueller said there is no way that he could vindicate him. There something did go on, and my thought is that what the Democrats are showing now is that there are three branches of government and they have the right to oversight. And with Trump refusing to do everything, the other night on one of the networks I saw the comparison of the speeches between Trump and Nixon, and they're the same things. And if you're going to cover up and not allow anyone to come and speak, if there's nothing now, there's going to be more. And there is plenty.
I worked in Government Reform Committee, which investigated Clinton back in the 90s. So I remember the other side of the exact same equation. I mean, it goes both ways.
And it's appropriate that it be investigated.
And it's
That's the point.
oversight, and the president
Regardless
does,
of party.
And the
Regardless of party.
But it has been investigated. When
No,
do we
it
move
isn't.
on?
No, it has not.
The
Not by
president
Congress.
does not has forgotten that there are three branches of government, and until he learns that. So on to the next topic. So much is going on in the world these days: bombings in Sri Lanka, Notre Dame burning, possible removal of 34 houses and 4 businesses for the Beltway widening, etc. So, panel, I want to ask you this question. What issue this week has been on your mind? You don't have 5 minutes, but briefly, we're going to start with Verelyn.
Well, as a small business owner, I've actually been thinking a lot about how many of the places that I frequent to do my day-to-day errands have replaced cashiers and employees with self-service kiosks and self-checkouts. And I think it's just something to think about and be mindful of as the $15 minimum wage continues to be phased in Montgomery County.
Susan, what's on your mind?
Well, I hosted 24 people at my Passover Seder last week, and that was a joyous and fun thing with family and friends. So that I focused on that, but I also did continue to focus on the Mueller report and on the important moving forward as we look at this president who is conducting a criminal enterprise out of the Oval Office.
So, John.
My biggest thing is what's going to happen next week down in Annapolis. I mean, what's on the line is chairmanships of Ways and Means, chairmanships of the Environment Committee. I think this is a very pivotal moment for Montgomery County, and how we handle ourselves is very important. I think it would be a shame if the next Speaker of the House is elected by Republicans. I'm sorry. But that's
So,
how I feel.
Mark, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm not, it didn't go into those kinds of topics. I went back to your 34 houses and 4 businesses. So I went back and looked to see how much eminent domain took place as a result of the purple line. And it's $250 million. $250 million was required to do it. Now, hopefully with the expansion on the Beltway, it won't be necessary. We'll be able to do some flyovers and some strategies. But 34 houses and 4 businesses pales in comparison to what was done with the purple line.
Okay, and what's on my mind is the fact that the Democratic candidate for President, Pete Buttigieg, is really soaring, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if the Democratic Party ultimately can support a gay man who is down the road, has a husband, a family, speaks 7 languages, and then if he were to get to the general election, what will happen? So now we're going to be back in a minute for parting shots. Now with parting shots, Susan, you're going to start.
Well, I just hope that our viewers will come to the Rockville Arts Fair on May 4th and May 5th. I'll be there at my booth at the F. Scott Fitzgerald Literary Festival booth. So please come visit me and come and enjoy all of the arts that Rockville has to offer.
Okay, so Verelyn, you're next.
I want to give a huge congratulations to the graduates of the Sunflower Bakery Pastry Arts Program, the 2019 graduates. This is a fantastic program for those with differing abilities that have a passion for the pastry arts, and they're just doing such a fantastic job. Keep up the great work, guys.
Oh, it's nice to have good news. Okay, Mark, you're next.
This past week was Take Your Daughters and Now Sons to Work Day, which is a great opportunity to expose kids to the workplace, to the way things get done, and really a great part of the social capital that we can provide to the next generation.
And did you fly your children in to go with you to work?
Fortunately, they're both in the workplace already, so.
I know, but you're too old for that to do that. Is that what you're saying? Or your children are too old? John, what's your parting shot?
I think it's going to be go Joe Biden. Saw his announcement. I think he's the right guy. I'm trying to decide where can I bed down in Des Moines, Iowa to go help him. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Right.
This is going to be an absolutely fascinating campaign. As I said earlier, I'm constantly amazed at Pete Buttigieg. But now that Joe is in, he's gone to the top. The current inhabitant of the White House seems to be freaking out about Vice President Biden, and from what I've heard, he is the one person that the White House is afraid of, because there may be more gaffes on his part than the part of the others, but he's trusted and he's respected. Yeah. And what I find interesting is I heard a conversation today about the Senate and how they treated Al Franken, and that where did it get them, and that, you know, Joe Biden is Joe Biden, and that everybody knows, and it's going to be fascinating.
And he didn't do anything close to what Al Franken did. And let me also mention that we learned today that Joe Biden raised more money than any other presidential candidate in 24 hours. $6.3 million.
Not bad.
Nope.
So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. This has been a lovely conversation, and I'm going to be back again next week because Casey's going to be out. So I told Casey I soon want equal billing. So anyway, so I look forward to...
That's going to make sure he comes back quickly.
Yeah, he'll be back soon, don't worry. But anyway, so I'll be back next week, and I want to thank you to the panelists and to the crew and to all of you for watching us each week.
And to our newest member.
Yes, Verelyn's her second time. So please watch again Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show 21 this week. Follow us on social media. See you next week. And I'm Susan Heltemes. Bye for now.